Good morning. Fantastic. Okay. Let me start. I have a written speech, so I have to read it. I would have loved to stand and talk from my heart, but I have to read. Well, on behalf of Mr. Graziano da Silva, the Director General of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, FAO, and on my own behalf, it's a real pleasure for me to welcome all of you to this very important international symposium on contract farming and other inclusive business models. For me, this conference is coming at a very opportune time because just about 2 weeks ago, I had a pleasure, an opportunity to visit with small-scale farmers who were working together with the government of Zimbabwe to support, particularly in the irrigation schemes. And some of the issues that I observed, particularly the relationships between farmers and the burgeoning private sector and the growing private sector in this country will be discussed in this conference. And I hope the conference will also answer some of the questions that I raised with my colleagues, because we as FAO are working with our partners and the government to rehabilitate several irrigation schemes. And in these schemes, the operators in these schemes are smallholder farmers. The products they produce are under contract. But there were some questions I raised, for instance, social issues, economic issues, price determination, legal issues. I hope all of these, at the end, you will help me to answer those questions. But if we look globally, from the latest statistics we have on the world food insecurity, it is estimated that 821 million people were undernourished in the year 2017. This was the third consecutive year in which hunger increased in the world after more than a decade of decline. This calls for an urgent need to address the issue of hunger and extreme poverty as recognized in the Sustainable Development Goals and specifically assigned to the SDG number 2. As the majority of the world's poor and food insecure live in rural areas, largely in developing countries, agriculture and rural development are key to the achievement of the SDGs. Unfortunately, the agricultural sector suffers from serious underinvestment, particularly in Africa or several African countries. Hence, neither a world free of hunger nor one free of poverty can be achieved by the target year 2030 without a substantial increase in public and private investment in agriculture and food systems. Unfortunately, not all kinds of investments are equally beneficial. Some investments carry significant risks for all actors involved. Thus, in order to generate sustainable benefits for all, it is essential to ensure that not only more, but above all, better investments in agriculture and food systems are promoted. It is therefore in this respect that in 2014, the FAO Committee on Food Security, CFS, adopted the principles for responsible investment in agriculture and food systems in order to provide guidance to all types of agricultural investments, including fisheries, forests, and livestock. The CFS REI comprises of 10 principles, and I'm sure these principles will also be discussed in this symposium, that covers a wide range of areas such as food security, eradication of poverty, gender equity, youth, tenure, and sustainable management of natural resources. And I'm very pleased that youth, not only youth farmers, but students have been invited to this workshop so that they can lend a voice to the discussions and debate in this conference. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the CFS REI also recognizes smallholders as major investors in the agricultural sector. In particular, taking into account those family farms that invest their own capital and labor in their agricultural activity. In addition, public investments that match investment by smallholders are important for fighting poverty and hunger. It is therefore important to note that the CFS REI emphasizes that public investment should enable, support, and complement investments by smallholders through improved access to inputs, markets, advisory and financial services, including insurance, education, extension, training, and infrastructure. Thus, in order to enhance responsible agricultural investments, FAO launched the umbrella program, Sustainable Responsible Investments in Agriculture and Food Systems. This program was launched in 2016. The program aims to support and engage all relevant actors, governments, small-scale producers, civil society organizations, and the private sector. In this context, FAO is promoting inclusive business models as one of the appropriate approaches that encourage the sustainable access of smallholders to markets with the underlying principle that there are mutual benefits for farmers and the private sector. As you are aware, inclusive business models are also a sustainable way of promoting responsible investments by this private sector because in most cases, they ensure that the private sector does not compete with smallholders, land, and other natural resources. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, FAO and its partners are also analyzing contract farming, public purchase programs, and collective marketing arrangements as some of the potential inclusive business models. These models will be discussed and debated during this international symposium. Again, contract farming is being analyzed because it has the potential to improve smallholders, farmers' access to markets and boost their incomes while ensuring that agribusinesses have a stable supply of produce that meets their quality standards. Furthermore, analyzing collective organizations is important because it gives smallholders a stronger negotiation power in the market. The 2 days international symposium is being organized by FAO, the Samoa African Institute for Agrarian Studies, and the International Institute for Sustainable Development. The International Symposium aims to promote policy dialogue, knowledge generation, and evidence gathering on contract farming and other inclusive models as approaches that have the potential to promote responsible agricultural investment. This symposium also aims to bring together the buyers, that's the agribusinesses, and farmers, producer organizations of various agricultural value chains or commodities in order to enhance discussions on how to improve contracts using the CFS REI and the OECD FAO guidelines for responsible agricultural supply chains and the FAO policy on contract farming. Finally, the symposium also provides an important platform where different stakeholders engaged in contract farming, particularly farmers and the private sector, can learn from each other's experiences. This symposium builds upon the ongoing partnerships between FAO and the Samoyo African Institute for Agrarian Studies, which was formalized through a memorandum of understanding in September 2016. I therefore invite each one of you and all participants to actively engage in the dialogue and debates during this symposium. And I thank you for listening.
I'd like to thank Dr. Patrick Kumara, the Sub-Regional Coordinator for the FAO, Southern Africa Food and Agriculture Organization, based here in Harare. I'd have liked to stand, but Boa says because it's live streaming, so I gotta sit down so that this thing is looking straight at me. So my apologies for that.
Same here.
Same here, yes. So my name is Joshua Ngoni, and I'm the current chairperson of the Board of Trustees of the Samoa African Institute for Agrarian Studies. Would like to take this opportunity to welcome all of you to this symposium, which has been organized in collaboration with the FAO, the International Institute for Sustainable Development. Please, I know that there are many of you who might be coming here for the first time, others are familiar faces, so it's so great to see all those faces. Please feel welcome. I also take note that there are people coming from all over the world, and so we'll try to be as accommodative, much as the English language is the one that is being used as a medium of communication. But we also just want to make sure that whether you speak your French, we do say bonjour once in a while, whether you're Swahili, we say karibu there, whether we say namaste there, or say ni hao from the other side, but please do feel welcome. And also to our local friends, they are farmers who I've seen from Zimbabwe, and I also understand they are farmers from across the river, from Malawi, from Tanzania, and Mozambique. Please do feel welcome. And there are also people of academic dispensation who also from time to time speak another language, but we're also making sure that they too feel welcome, because this is about issues of the stomach, of food, and those affect all of us one way or the other. After the speaking has been done, the analysis has been done, and the reports have been written, we still want to show that the farmer is happy, but the consumer is happy too. So I would like to thank FAO for partnering us, especially as Dr. Komaro has said about the memorandum of understanding that we formulated and agreed on about 2016 to further the work that is going on here in the agrarian South and issues of land and people's livelihoods. So this current conference is a culmination of, manifestation of that MOU, and we are very grateful for the partnership. As you recall from your papers, you do see quite a lot of subject matter is going to be coming in, but I'd like to just thank the organizers, Walter Chambati and his staff at the Samayas, for putting together the program, which is very interesting because it calls for such central things about responsible investment. Many times when we chase money, we also forget that we're talking about people's lives, and that issue about discussing responsible investment, I think is pretty crucial at this time. Also, the issue that we need to be inclusive across gender, across enterprises, and We are now talking about the private sector, talking to the people, talking to institutions. We need to have a common understanding of the challenges that face us, as I say, on making sure that affordable food is on the table. So we'll also welcome the regional perspectives. As I said earlier on, we've got people coming in from Latin America, from Asia, from Southern Africa, from West Africa, from a whole lot of places. So we hope that that exchange of ideas and discourse will enrich our understanding of the issues at hand, but also that we need to make sure that we understand what the farmers' circumstances are. And so hopefully during the discourse that will all be enriched. But let me say as a last welcome thing is that please do enjoy your stay. Do take time after we've spoken to enjoy the local cuisine, the local drink, and the local dance. I noticed from last year there are a lot of other people who really like dance. So do make sure that you enjoy your stay. Otherwise, welcome. Thank you. I think I'd like to give over the session now to Professor Sukhpal, Singh from the Indian Institute of Management, to come over and end over the next session. Thank you. You're welcome.
Good morning, friends. Let me say that I'm very happy to be here. I would like to thank FAO and the Institute of African Studies, African Agrarian Studies, and Dr. Praveen Jha, particularly to sort of invite me here and learn with the group on this very important issue of how to link farmers to markets in a responsible way. Of course, this session I'm chairing is devoted to the issue of responsible investments in agriculture and food systems, trends and challenges. Since we have very limited time, only 40 minutes for 2 speakers, I would not really like to make too many comments. I think we all understand that agriculture faces the issues of sustainability, food security, and equity almost across the globe in smallholder farming systems. Some people call it agrarian distress, and others call it agrarian crisis in most of the developing world, whether in Latin America or Africa or Asia. It is reflected in terms of stagnating or low yields because of lack of technologies. It is also about the increasing costs of production and marketing, and most importantly, the farmers, smallholder farmers, not able to access good markets and good prices for their produce. And very many reasons could be sort of argued for this. But I think a big issue is that there has been a policy neglect of smallholder agriculture almost everywhere globally. And more so when I say policy neglect, I mean policy neglect from a smallholder and worker perspective. I somehow feel that the real heroes of agriculture are the smallholder farmers, the tenants, and the workers on those farms or other farms. So we have very many problems this count that we are not able to appreciate the role of smallholders and workers in agriculture and food production systems, and provide for mechanisms for their not only entry into this age of global value chains, but also sustainable presence there in terms of being stakeholders and important partners in progress in this scenario. I think we all appreciate that when we talk about responsible investments. We are already into it in some way. I'm sure all of you have heard about the very important SDG goal of sustainable production and consumption, which is all about responsible investments from all stakeholders. And also there are movements globally, already initiatives globally, for example, responsible soya, responsible palm oil, better cotton initiative, better sugarcane initiative. These are all corporate driven global initiatives supported by a lot of global agencies. I've been personally involved in assessing the performance of better cotton initiatives in South Asia, particularly India and Pakistan, in the recent past. And the unfortunate thing is that a lot of these initiatives escape the policy attention. I'm referring particularly to India and Pakistan. Our governments don't even know that this kind of global initiative is in place. Better cotton initiative is in place in all the 10 cotton growing districts of states of India for the last almost 7 or 8 years. Similarly in Pakistan, China, and so on. So corporates have taken a lead in looking at some of the sustainability problems because it affects them directly. And this is nothing but enlightened self-interest, yeah, enlightened self-vested interest, whatever you want to call it. So I think I'm very happy that we have this topic before us today and tomorrow to look at how do you make modern agriculture, which is driven by value chains, not only sustainable but also inclusive of small farmers and workers. So I would invite the two speakers for this session now. Mr. Michel Riggs from FAO and Mr. Ngoni Chikowe from Zimbabwe Smallholder Organic Farmers Forum. If you could please come here, that would be good. Yeah, please. So I would like to say that 15 minutes would be given to each speaker. Is that fine? That's correct. Yeah, 15 minutes. Yeah. So I would now invite Mr. Riggs to present to us his perspective on responsible investment in agriculture and food systems. Mr. Riggs.
So I'll go to the podium. Yeah, Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Hi, it's very nice to be here. Again, my name is Michel Riggs. I work with FAO. I am part of the group that deals specifically with the issue of responsible investment and the application of something we call the CFS principles for responsible investment in agriculture and food systems, which I'll talk more about. I am based in Rome, in FAO's headquarters in Italy. I've been with FAO for about 18 years, based in various parts of the world. Most of my career actually has been in Asia, so it's a real pleasure for me to be here today and tomorrow with you, not only to tell you about what FAO is doing, but actually to listen to what you're doing and to learn from you. So thank you for this opportunity. I think when we talk about investment, at least in the news and the media, we often hear about large-scale investment, foreign direct investment, transnational corporations making investments. But one of the realities that FAO is important to point out is the relevance, actually the majority of investment in the agricultural sector being made by smallholders and small-scale producers. And we're looking at not only crop agriculture production, but also people who are foresters and people working in the fisheries sector. So in 2012, the FAO study on the state of food and agriculture, which we call SOFA, highlighted the fact that farmers are the largest investors in production agriculture, but that there are other areas of agricultural investment that are also important, of course. Public investment is very important, the strategy that goes behind public investment, but also the public sector's role in setting policy and guidelines and legal frameworks around investment. And the political investment, this was mentioned earlier, being aware of what's going on in the agricultural sector and developing policies and priorities that support it. So our sub-regional representative, Dr. Patrick Kwarma, has done a good job of explaining this to you already. But again, why is agricultural investment such an important topic to an organization like FAO? Our mandate is to support agriculture production, to reduce hunger in the world, and we know that investing in agriculture is one of the most effective strategies for this. It's also an important area of economic growth, but data shows us that countries in the developing world suffer particularly from underinvestment in this sector, again, globally speaking, particularly in low-income countries. Due to this underinvestment, we figure there's a lot of opportunity here, an opportunity for economic growth, an opportunity for improved food production, but also opportunities to employ more people, and particularly to employ young people outside of urban areas. Those of us working in the United Nations and also those in governments will know that all of our governments have committed to the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. In particular, I'll mention SDG 1 and 2, although SDG 9 was already mentioned. SDG 1 is a commitment to eliminate poverty, and SDG 2 is to eliminate hunger by the year 2030. So how are we going to do this? Well, in financial terms, again, FAO estimates that we need to invest an extra $265 billion per year. About 140 billion of that is in crop agriculture. So huge amounts of money need to come into our sector where we work and live. And the numbers themselves, different organizations have come up with different numbers. I think the important thing is that they're enormous numbers. All the numbers are in the billions range, tens and tens, if not hundreds of billions. But we want to ensure that the point here is not only to get more investment, but to get better investment. Because we know, again, from experience that investment wrongly placed causes trouble. It not only causes positive benefits. And in response to realizing the importance of responsible investment and the importance of investment that does good things, the global community, the UN and other bodies have come together over the past 10 years and created several what we call guidance instruments. One of these is the CFS Principles for Responsible Investment in Agriculture and Food Systems. Another one are the Voluntary Guidelines for Responsible Governance of Tenure of Land, Fisheries and Forests. Another one is the OECD FAO Guidance for Responsible Agricultural Supply Chains. So there are many things out there now that are trying to help us find the way to ensuring that these increased investments that we need are not only more, but better. Today, I'm going to talk specifically about one. Actually, today and tomorrow, we'll focus mainly on one area. And this is presented to you in this little booklet, which is available outside if you didn't pick one up already. These are the Committee on World Food Securities, the CFS, Principles on Responsible Investment in Agriculture and Food Systems. So it's important to know that CFS is a UN body, but it's not FAO. CFS is made up of tripartite membership. It has representation from member states, so our governments are represented and vote. But it also has representatives from civil society organizations and from the private sector. So it's a very unique tripartite organizational structure that developed and improved and adopted these 10 principles. So our belief in FAO is that these are very widely relevant to all of us. They're not just for one sector. They're intended to be for everyone. So, assuming that we are all equally familiar with these principles at the moment, I'll just run through them. As I mentioned, there are 10. They are principles. They're very global. They're very high level. They're not binding. No, there's no law behind these. But the intention with them being approved is that we would take them and to the best of our ability and apply them in our local circumstance. Whether you're a farmer or a businessman who's issuing contracts, whether you're a banker providing loans to the agricultural sector, whether you're an organization like FAO that's guiding on policies or whatnot, that these 10 principles should guide everything we do related to investment. So the first two principles I think are somewhat obvious. They actually correlate directly to SDGs 2 and SDG 1, which is that investment to be responsible should contribute directly to improving food security and nutrition, because investments can have a negative impact. Number 2 is that they should contribute to sustainable and inclusive economic development. The livelihoods of people both in urban and rural areas is critical. We've committed to improving them in the SDGs, and investment in the agricultural sector should do just that. Investment also needs, though, to look carefully at what we classify as vulnerable populations. Principle 3, women's empowerment. Investment needs to look at this. Investment is not gender neutral, and we can't assume that it is. Principle number 4, investment needs to engage and empower young people. Young people are the future of food security, the future of the supply of food to our cities. And as somebody said during CFS Week 2 weeks ago, though, we can't relegate young people to the future. Young people are here now. So investments that are being made today need to address their needs and enable them to be successful in the future, to drive both food security and employment opportunities. CFS Principle 5 builds directly on the voluntary guidelines of the VTGT, which is that investments should respect tenure. Principle 6 is about conserving and sustainably managing natural resources and being responsive in terms of resilience, climate change, and disaster risks. 7 is on respecting cultural heritage, traditional knowledge, and supporting diversity and innovation. It's extremely important that not all the innovation in agriculture comes from the global north. The global south has a lot to offer, and also a lot that needs to be respected. Food systems need to be safe and healthy. We need to keep this in mind, particularly in our global food systems, where outbreaks of disease and infections can spread rapidly. Principles 9 and 10 shift away from looking at specific areas where investment needs to improve, or technical issues of investment, and looks at issues of process. Principle number 9 says that good investment needs to incorporate inclusive and transparent governance and allow for grievance mechanisms. Not everything works successfully. Not every investment that we intend to be responsible works out right. There needs to be methods and mechanisms through which people can express problems, through which they can express them safely, through which they can express them and get legitimate action, no matter who they are, no matter where they're from. And then access to and addressing impacts and promoting accountability. Principle 10 is really about information and transparency. Investments are not always transparent. It's not always clear what's happening, who's investing where the investments are coming from. And this is critical. But also, what happens when there are investments? Which investments are good and which investments are not so good? We need more information about this to make better decisions. We as policymakers, farmers need this information, academics need this information, and people need this information. So we need to work collectively to ensure that this is happening. To learn more about these principles, as I said, there is this handout, booklet, which explains them. But there's also a small application, which is available. You can remember this flyer, pick it up. It tells you how to find it. It's something that FAO developed. It's part of our e-learning courses, our global collection of e-learning courses. But this one introduces the 10 CFS principles, what they are, who they're for, why they were developed. It's a nice little application. You can do it in about 40 minutes. It works on your mobile phone, so it's not too complicated.
Michael,
it is available in
5 minutes.
5 minutes, thanks. In English, French, and Spanish. Okay. So, as I said, FAO itself has been responsible for developing a program, which Patrick mentioned, called the Umbrella Program to Support Responsible Investment in Agriculture and Food Systems. And again, I'm going to tell you, you can read all about it here. I'm not going to go into any detail. but to tell you that this umbrella program is what guides the work of FAO in working with member states, but also civil society and the private sector, in understanding the principles for responsible investment and applying them in our areas of work. We look for this umbrella program to improve investments in agriculture and food systems, to ensure that they are more responsible, and therefore to contribute to food security, nutrition, and sustainable development. It has several outputs, and just in summary, the major outputs are to make people more aware. Most people don't know what these are. They're a global instrument. It's important that they're really recognized now at a grassroots level, but not only recognized, but understood is why are they relevant to me? Why do I need to know about them? Why does my family back in my home country who works on a farm need to know about them? What are they good for? And how can they be applied? What do our governments need to do to support us to invest more responsibly? How does the financial sector need to respond to this? How do value chains need to respond? How do supply chains need to respond? All these things are our goals, FAO's goals are summarized in this document. So being UN, it's a little bit of a complex process in terms of how we're working. We're working with several partners and several donors, which I'm happy to talk with you more about on the sidelines of this. But as a last step, I'll go through 2 slides which quickly summarize some of the areas where we're working. So we are working with the private sector, in particular on something called the OECD and FAO Guidance for Responsible Agricultural Supply Chains. It's a very important area of impacting responsible investment. We're looking at multi-stakeholder models for inclusive business, and today and tomorrow are a very important activity in that area, working with SMICE and with IASD on this, on contract farming, but also other issues of inclusive business. We are working with young people and youth organizations, and you'll hear more about that later today from one of our representatives here from the World Farmers Organization. And again, I'm glad to talk to you more about that. I also, outside there's another flyer about our area of work with youth, because I think I promise we won't talk too much about it, but I think it's very, very important in the long future of what we're doing. We're doing capacity development work with policymakers, with parliamentarians in Latin America. We are focusing on issues related to gender and how investment impacts women and young women in the agricultural sector, what particular needs they have, how investment can actually empower them as opposed to disenfranchising them. We're developing learning materials. So as I mentioned, the brief introduction to the CFS principles is the first one. Early next year, we'll come out with a major program on policies related, developing policies related to responsible investment. We are working, again, I mentioned, with parliamentarians and with other stakeholder groups. So again, we're very pleased. This activity of the next 2 days is a key component in the area of looking at inclusive business models and contract farming. My colleagues from FAO, IASD, and SMICE will tell you more about our work. I'm here Monday to talk about the big picture. So again, I'm happy to speak with you more during the breaks about FAO's activities, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Sorry, one last slide. These are some of the partners that we're working with, some of the governments that are providing us funding, some of the units within FAO, but also across the UN system. So again, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Michael, for taking us through the FAO's engagement with the agriculture sector and smallholders and partnership you're building with various stakeholders. Thank you very much. Now may I request Mr. Chikowe. He's from the Zimbabwe Smallholder Organic Farmers Forum. He would share with us his insights on the contribution family farmers are making to investments in agriculture.
Good morning. Good morning, comrades.
Good morning.
May I stand to be excused to give my presentation whilst I'm seated, because I stand all day in the field. My name is Ngoni Chikowe. I'm representing Via Campesina and working with the Zimbabwe Smallholder Organic Farmers Forum. I'm here to give a presentation on the side of a small scale across the world. My introductory remarks are as follows. Agriculture dominates the economies of most African countries, particularly in Africa. Smallholder farmers constitute the majority of the farming population. This group forms the diverse constituencies of our organizations and produces about 70% of our food consumed by humanity. Peasant farmers farming is multifunctional, dynamic and non-static, and promotes local development. They are the primary global investors in agriculture as well as primary providers of job and livelihood in the world. Yet we receive very little attention on public spending and research and development, credit infrastructure development to enable access to markets.
I think the PowerPoint is not on.
No, it's not that one. It's
Yeah?
not that one.
Not there. Okay.
Peasant-led investment in agriculture.
I think put it to slideshow. It's still not. Next one.
Peasant-led investment in agriculture. Labor investment, that is, we have direct and indirect. For direct, we have skills, knowledge development to improve the quality of resource base, which in turn increase agricultural productivity per unit area. This is through the use of cattle manure, water harvesting pits, integrated pest management systems, multiple and intensive cropping. Then we have indirect investments, or farming income engaging in other economic activities to earn income to investment in the farm through the acquiring of animals, orchards, that is trees, patches, tools, vehicles, and machineries for processing for agricultural produces for the value chain. Social networks, which is the laboratory for the peasantry movement. Where we exchange seeds, knowledge, and sustainable agriculture through our agroecological schools. Intensification of cropping schemes, increased biodiversity and ecological friendliness, effective use of limited resources, peasants continuously fine-tune cropping schemes and the cultivation of diverse to derive the best outcomes socially, economically, and ecologically. Post-harvest practices. On-farm processing and preservation, now sought by consumers of organic products, which is, for example, cheese, dried fruits, and vegetables. Creating sustainable agricultural markets. To promote direct and fair short distribution chains, transparent relationship between producers and consumers, support farm-to-city direct marketing of ecologically production through farmers' markets, link rural and urban cooperatives. In rare cases, where there are opportunities for small-scale farmers to derive high income in commodity-specific arrangements, outgrower and contract farming, like in the case of peasants who already grow coffee, cocoa, and tea. Farmers and peasants benefit only when they are members of strong social movements such as Via Campesina, and when their rights and ability to bargain collectively over prices and other conditions of production are guaranteed and strengthened. States plays an important role in shaping a better life for peasants, as it is principal agent of change through policy design and implementation. State policies should recognize peasants' farming and protect them from external market factors. Broad implementation of food sovereignty policies, including the protection of national markets from dumping, hoarding, and speculation by corporations, and systems to guarantee fair price for peasants' food production are imperative. Contract farming arrangement and challenges. Right to food for local communities involved in contractual farming arrangements not upheld. Prioritization of export for agro-industrial commodities. Checks and balances need to ensure that food sovereignty and security are not compromised in pursuit of foreign exchange earnings in private sector profits. Indirect land grabbing and labor production. This is when farmers, at times when they enter into contracts, the contracts is designed by those that are bringing the inputs, and it's not on a 50-50 basis to say the farmer is going to provide labor and the land. So mostly in contract farming and small-scale farmers, we face challenges that will be left heavily indebted due to some reasons like climate and also the retaining of the inputs that would have acquired for whoever is coming into contract with small-scale farmers. Concern of downstream effects of technology and infrastructure designed for commercial agriculture and adjacent communities. GMOs, agrochemicals effects on ecosystems, pollinators, water competition causing scarcity. How to ensure that small-scale farmers also benefit from costly rural infrastructure created to support contract farming arrangements. Innovation is limited. Sustainability of contract farming tied to profitability. Contract farming arrangements seek to incorporate individual smallholder farmers into high-value production, saving global supply chains, thereby disconnect the peasants as a collective from their social, cultural, and natural environments. Farmers are squeezed between input industries and the retailer sector, their incomes decreasing by 1/3, of which we witnessed in the European small farms that disappeared in the last decade because of being unable to survive under such conditions. Building on the past, looking to the future. Developing joint strategies to promote agroecology and food sovereignty to stimulate local development. Through farmer-to-farmer and territorial processes, peasants have developed successful farming practices and production systems. On innovation, research and crop life and livestock selection and breeding, peasants continue to develop diverse knowledge, though most of these are not documented, which is a gap among us as small-scale farmers that we're doing quite a lot of work, but there's lack of documentation for that. We need to redirect public sector investment to much more equitable institutional and technological innovations complemented by rural education and physical infrastructure. For example, things like transport, schools, farmer-owned storage facilities, local and regional farmers markets. My concluding remarks are as follows. Through agroecology and food sovereignty, small-scale farmers has contributed to agriculture through promoting agro-biodiversity, new innovations and sustainable production systems, promoting soil fertility and climate resilience, mitigation and adaptation. Peasants' investments are not adequately quantified in monetary terms, relegated to the bottom and not recognized. Agricultural financing strategy that actually supports peasants and family farmers' production that is not biased towards agribusiness and that doesn't burden small-scale farmers with unpayable debts is required. Proper regulation, states oversight. Proper regulation, states oversight are required to ensure that contracts provide development rather than being exploitative. Stronger policies are required to support agricultural biodiversity in the hands of peasants and small-scale farmers, as these ensure adequate and appropriate nutrition in the face of the changing climate. Food diversity, based on crop diversity grown by a small-scale farmer who is the first consumer and is a better and more effective alternative to fight malnutrition. We need urgent and deep structural transformation, including true agrarian reforms, and defending, protecting, and keeping territories, which are land, water, forestry, etc. Under the control of the majority of the world's population, peasants, fisherfolk, and other peoples, we must engage to develop a different kind of society through a radical transformation towards a fair and decent food system for all, based on the principles of food sovereignty. I'd like to thank you all.
Thank you, Ngoni, for giving us an alternative perspective, that too from a small farmers network or forum. Friends, now we have had two presentations before us. We have 9 minutes to be precise. If you would like to ask any questions or clarifications from the two presenters, I'm sure they'll be happy to attend to it. I really don't want to summarize what they have said. It was so clear. So please feel free to ask any questions or clarifications if you have. Yes, please, the lady there. Would you identify yourself and ask the question then?
Yeah, my name is Helena Pereznino, and I work on tobacco in Mozambique. Though I don't work in Mozambique, but I work on Mozambique. I have a question for the FAO representative. I was intrigued in your presentation by mentioning what work you do with crop buyers and all these monopsonic companies that are ultimately driving these commodity chains. So you mentioned a lot of work that you're doing with farmers, with different stakeholders, with states. But could you perhaps tell us what is it that you do in terms of enforcing and promoting these principles for responsible farming with the companies themselves? Thank you.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, we'll go right away. Thank you very much for your. I'm going to maybe take a little bit of a shortcut answer, which is that we're actually going to talk more about this tomorrow. The second day will look more at issues related to the private sector. So I hope you're also here with us tomorrow. But to address your question for the moment, I think it's important that we keep in mind that these principles, not only the CFS principles for responsible investment, but also the OECD FAO guidance, responsible supply chains, which are very critical to the private sector and their ability to understand and not only to understand responsible investment, but to measure how they're doing in terms of upholding their interest in working responsibly, is that these are voluntary instruments. There is no enforcement mechanism behind them. So for the moment, as FAO, we have two options. We work, to be very honest, with the willing. And I won't, say things as anything different than it is. Only some organizations at this time are willing and interested in this. Some have realized that sustainable business practices are in their own self-interest. Some of them have realized that there has been damage done in the past and that they need to make amends for that, and others have not. So we work with this as we can. We work with many other organizations as well by ourselves. One of the areas, as I mentioned, is this work with the OECD FAO guidance. There is a large pilot project going on currently with more than 30 companies from the private sector, from various parts of the value chain, that are looking to actually apply the guidance within their own systems and value chains. And it's very promising at this point in time. But again, it's a starting point. The other area, though, where FAO does work is with the member states, with the actual governments. It's why our work with parliamentarians and policymakers is so important. These voluntary guidance, or what we sometimes call soft law instruments, can be converted to hard law at the national level. They can be used to reform, revise, and update existing laws and policies that govern the way investments are being made, the way supply chains are being governed, the way laws allow organizations to invest, both national and international, both smallholders and large scale. So we work on both of these issues. But,
Thank you. Thank you. We have time for one more question or intervention. Anyone? Yes, please.
I Fatima from Ghana. I want to know what FAO does with regards to environmental sustainability, especially with regards to soils.
Oh. All right, now I'm going to be very honest with you. I'm an honest man, I promise you. You are asking a question that is not my area of expertise. So what I can tell you generally is that the issue of environmental sustainability is a critical element of responsible investment, which is the area where I work. It's actually one of the 10 principles. So in my area of work, in my team's work, this is an issue that we raise in the sense of being aware of the impact that investment has on the environment. I'm trained actually as an economist. I understand the issue of bringing externalities in. Most businesses don't. So it's something that is looked at. But there is an entire division in FAO, that I don't represent, that works on this issue. And there's a unit that looks specifically at soils, which I will tell you very honestly, I'm not the right person to answer. So what I would suggest is that unless one of my colleagues wants to step in on this, because I don't think any of us are from this area, we cover other areas of responsible investment that I have to promise maybe we can get back to you with some more information.
Thank you. Yeah. Yes, please. The last question.
My name is Gashan. I work for the from the presentation, the last presentation, a major structural problem that is confronted peasants, I guess, is being locked into commodity production, particularly under unfavorable change. So I'm trying to reconcile the interest to achieve SDGs in the primary presentation, and the need to sort of deal with issues raised, particularly by peasants, in terms of how do you integrate peasants into global commodity markets under favorable change. I think that's the core of the problem that peasants tend to face historically. So we need to be able to reconcile those, particularly when we are talking about peasants in Africa. But it is always an issue of commodity production, and the issue of contract farming comes to play now.
Thank you.
I think I just wanted a reflection on how we can reconcile the two.
Respond.
I think this is why we're all here. Very honestly, and I think maybe a very important point that the other speaker brought up was that in the case where peasants, if I'm correct, you said are working in a situation where they're producing products that they can earn their livelihood through contract farming, we need to ensure that those circumstances are leveled out, that the farmers are empowered, that they are organized, that their organizations in particular are able to equip them with the ability to understand what's happening and to ensure that the contracts are to their advantage. Because this is the point of our intention to achieve SDGs 1 and 2. One is to eliminate poverty. So livelihoods have to be improved in general. It doesn't give us guidance, it's a goal. It doesn't tell us how to get there. We just promise to meet this goal. And the second one is to eliminate hunger. The second SDG is to eliminate hunger. Again, the SDGs don't provide guidance, they provide a goal. So we believe that one of the ways to get there is through improving awareness of responsible investment. As we know, there's going to be more investment in the agricultural sector. It's going to happen. You as farmers invest. Producer organizations invest. FAO invests in knowledge, right? Your governments invest in infrastructure. So there's a lot of investment. So how can we improve that? And inclusive business models are an important area. I don't want anybody to think that we're saying that this is the only option or this is the only way. This is also quite important. We're really here today for 2 days to talk about a very narrow area of responsible investment. But it's an area that FAO believes, and our colleagues who are here with us believe is very important. Important because it exists, and it's not always working well, and we'll hear much about that from others today. But also it's an opportunity where we can have a lot of positive impact.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think as you could see from the questions raised, we're already in that mode. And that was the purpose of this. I think we are out of time now. So I would just like to make one statement for you to think about it, in the sense that when you're looking at the inclusive business models or contract farming, role of contract farming, I think we should not forget that we are just looking at market-based mechanisms for smallholder engagement. So they have their own problems. How to make contract farming work for smallholders is a big issue. And a lot of it is to do with factors outside the contract farming system, which may be between buyer and seller. So I generally say that contract farming as a mechanism is not good or bad. It is how you use it, who undertakes contract farming with whom, under what conditions, and what crops, what markets. That makes the difference. So it has worked in some situations, it has completely failed in others, and struggling in other areas. And this is just one of the mechanisms. And we are talking about this in the situation of state failure, and in many cases also other market failure. So this is another market channel for farmers to engage with markets. How we design it, implement in terms of making it deliver for better sustainable agriculture development, which is inclusive. I think that is the sort of at the core of the discussion we're going to have over the next 2 days. So I thank both the speakers for giving us these insights, which led to this kind of engagement already, and all of you for being patient and also asking very good questions. I would like to thank the organizers. I forgot to mention IISD, International Institute for Sustainable Development, being one of the organizers. So thank you very much. I think we are out of time. We have tea break now. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's